My name is Alex Chehorsky.
I'm Regina Ravazova.
We belong to two different generations.
We're former refugees.
I've served and worked in two armies, Russian and American.
And I was among civilians trapped in a war at the age of 7.
I am a former Putin's classmate.
I'm a mother of 3.
We are now watching the tragedy of Ukraine unfold in front of our eyes.
Watching from across the ocean, it is a distant war, yet very personal. Very good to see you, Sash, again in the studio.
Good to see you, Regina.
Sash, you mentioned when we talked before about some sort of big switch or change of direction, or how are you going to call it? And you said it's not within the war, and you said it's not a one-time deal. Could you expand on this?
Yes, thank you, Regina. What I wanted to say is that, again, if our listeners remember our podcast, we're trying not to fixate on the news because, first of all, because there are many people who are talking about the news, and we are mostly trying to center our thinking around things that are happening with long, so to speak, with the long tails, that the things that can that will be going into future and form the future the way, and that's an attempt to see which of the things are having these long tails and which of them do not. So, in my opinion, what we see today that has a potential to have very long tails, so to speak, are manifold. This is not like a break, or this is not something that just broke in one place, or something that reversed itself in one place. It's a multiple reversals in different levels, in strategy, in the brains of the, so to speak, of the world, in the brains of the European leaders, in many ways, the prediction of how that will all crisscross each other and what will grow out of this is quite, of course, difficult. But at the same time, all the vectors are pointing that the Ukraine will benefit from what's going on now in a long-term strategic way. This is what I mean. First of all, in my opinion, the most important thing is the reversal or big change that happened in the brains of the leaders of old Europe. If you remember that train that came to Kiev with Scholz, with Macron, and later that were joined by the Italian Prime Minister, they definitely was. All that time, they were kind of trying to convince Zelensky and Ukraine, to give something up, to just do the peace agreement with Russia, stop this whole thing, so we can all happily go further. That mood I've seen in the brains of the European leaders since I started to be interested in politics when I still was in a middle school. That believe that if you give a bad guy, let's say a Hitler, or I don't know, a Khrushchev, a Brezhnev, if you give him something more, then he'll take it and he'll just smile and he will become a peaceful guy, and that's the last thing. So this is where the huge break in the thinking lies between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. Eastern Europe always knew that the more you give the dragon, the more it wants. It's just absolutely inevitable. And it took the tragedy of the World War II and a lot of lost political battles after that, the next half a century, to finally convince a little bit, at least a bit, and mostly by Reagan, by Americans, they convinced the European leaders that this is not that simple. And in the last month, in the last 2 weeks, or whatever time has passed since this visit in Kiev, what we saw is that probably, I'm hoping, I'm of course optimistic, we saw the last mountain, so to speak, to be overcome. We now see that train on the other side of the pass. Because I don't know whatever Zelensky and his guys showed the old Europe leaders, but they definitely showed them something that radically changed their thinking. That radical change may be the most important thing that happened and will happen in this century. If that happened, if I am not too optimistic, if this is really a change, if this is not just again a temporary thing, but the way they changed their rhetoric, the way they said that Ukraine should choose itself how to win this war and what the goals are, the way how they immediately opened the roads for transferring the heavy ammunition and the heavy attack military equipment to Ukraine, which you remember every day they had a different excuse, and that excuse, and then bang, the doors were open and the trains left the stations with this equipment, which was incredible if you think how much of that was moved in such a short time. So that break, I would talk more about it, but I still want to show the other, the break in other domains too. But that is the most important break. The most important thing is when people's brains started to move into the right direction.
So a few things, Sash. Right after that, we call it Ramstein 3. It's not really called Ramstein 3. It's what we're talking about is a meeting at Brussels summit, I believe. Right after this, people that watch the war closely through, news, notice the insurmountable amount of the intensity increased 100%. Intensity increased in the different fronts. There again, I mentioned the explosions in the capital of Ukraine, and many other places. Heartbreaking scenes from there. Macron surprised me the most. He went from "Don't anger Putin" to "That's it." Here, Ukraine, everything you need from us. Here, we're gonna support you until the end.
But you understand that it didn't happen because, I don't know, somebody convinced him, right? He has to saw something. He has to witness something. He has to be shown something.
Right, and we don't know that.
We don't know that, and probably we will not know that for a long time. But there was definitely something. There was definitely a point where his eyes went wide and his mind changed.
And Kremlin knew about it. Something that has changed during that Brussels summit. Kremlin knew about it. I'm just judging by the intensity of the shelling, bombing, and so on and so forth, of the civilian objects.
Of course, but you and I know that the only answer Putin has is an intensification, right? There's nothing else. This is Russia, right? They're not going to politics. They're not going to diplomatics. They just, for every shell that they were shooting before, they will shell too. It's so predictable. It's tragic. I mean, it's comic if it wouldn't be so sad, but this is tragic. So that reaction we understand. But when a leader of a European democracy changes that attitude that fast, you understand that something happened in the process. You know what I'm saying? That so to speak, the train is on the other side, because coming back will be very, very difficult. He could have spent a lot of time in between, like one day saying one thing, another thing, yes, but there will be another but, then there will be, what I'm saying? We know how it's done in France and Germany. This is, it was done for many, many times. But that was he did not have to do that. He could have given away a little bit by bit. You know what I'm saying? No, they jumped over. They both, all of them, they did a long jump. And they said, now, anything you want. You understand how difficult it was for them, right? After that much resistance. So that changing in the brains, that's one thing. On the other hand, a lot of people watch what's going on the front in eastern Ukraine. And not a lot of people are happy because it doesn't look very, very good. You know what I'm saying? What people need to understand here is that very few military experts can really understand what's going on, to tell you the truth. But strategically, what Ukraine is doing is Ukraine is what in Russian is called by the term перемалывать, which is to mill. That is a very interesting. Give me a couple of minutes to tell you something that very few people think about. When you were looking at the Russian films, or reading the Russian war literature, right? You always had that repeating theme. We took the height number. You know what I'm saying? The heights. You know, the hills. You know, the on the map you see them as the top of the hills. You know, and it has a certain military value because if you put your artillery in the top of the hill, you know, you have a longer range and so on and so on. But it's only part of the story. The real story is that when the high command asks commanders what's going on, there has to be a way to objectively interpret what they say. They say, oh, we took that territory. But is it true or not? No one knows. Because when a Russian army is an army of lies, not every army is like that. But the Russian commanders easily lie. You know what I'm saying? Say, oh, I took that and oh, bang, you didn't give me a support and I lost it. You know what I'm saying? But it's your fault, not mine. This is what I'm trying to tell you. So Stalin, who believed no one, I don't know if he invented the system or it was invented before him, but it was very widely used in the World War II. So the goal is to take, you know, the dots where you can prove that you were there. And what that led to is that the army, instead of killing the enemy's army, was taking territory. You know what I'm saying? And that's not the same thing. And this is so heavily, so deeply ingrained into the Russian military doctrine, which is, if you remember, that it's not because of my 2 years as a conscript in the Russian army, but it's mostly because of 5 years in the university, when every week 1 day was a military education, right? Serious. And when we finished the university, the civilian university, you still get your epaulets and you still get your military rank. And it's ingrained when we were taught the tactics and everything else. By the way, some of them understood it, but it doesn't matter. It's still ingrained very heavily in the psyche of a Russian army that winning is taking territory. If you took that territory, you're winning. But that is not true. Winning is to diminish and kill the army of your enemy. That's what winning is. If you kill more percentage-wise people, or you destroy the army, you destroy its communications, you destroy supplies, in a very short time, there is no one there to fight with you. And all the territory is yours, if you really want it. You know what I'm saying? So what happens today, and why am I telling you that, is because the Russian army behaves like a Russian army. They try to take territory. And the Ukrainian army is a 21st century European army. It mills down the Russians. Artillery and everything else. And then they go back. You know, they retreat. Retreat in the Russian army is like, it's the last thing you do. It's what everybody try to avoid. Because when you call Moscow and say we retreated, you immediately get negative feedback. But it is not important. What important is that if you destroyed enough of an enemy army while you were maneuvering, maneuver anything you want. Make your enemy believe that you're here till the last moment, till the last soldier. So they throw everything at you. But if you know how to avoid that, and you understand that they're wasting, that they're going attack after attack, and you destroying more and more soldiers, and they lose more and more soldiers, and they lose more and more equipment and everything. This is what you do. You destroy the enemy army, and that's the most important thing. Also, it has an enormous psychological effect, because when an attacking army finds itself being cut by a half on an empty another 10 hectares, 1,000 hectares, what's the difference? You understand what I'm saying? It's one thing to take cities. That has a lot of value. But if you can destroy an army in the field, that's what you're trying to do. And this is why you conserve your reserves, and after you destroyed a good part of the enemy army, then you counterattack. And then you will take back what you were losing centimeter by centimeter during month. You will take back that within several days. That's a real field operational level. And the Russians are very bad at that, because they still teach all that hogwash in the Russian military academies, and we've seen how awful that is, both in Ukrainian war and in Karabakh and everywhere else. When we saw that the two armies, one of them being educated in the Russian academies, and another, even if a lot of its officers were educated in the Russian academies, had access to someone else's, like to Turkey's military education system, and had a chance to touch the 21st century military science.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, Sash, let me ask you this, okay? Because I'm not really that optimistic. Coming from a standpoint of, I'm not a military expert. I'm not even pretending to be. Lots of Ukrainians, hundreds of them are dying every day at the battlefield, right? I'm not even counting any more Russians. That's their choice. They're performing occupational war. The heavy weaponry, well, they were asking really loud for many, many weeks. Now, finally, I think there are some changes there. Belarus. Many experts are saying that I'm listening to, they're saying that there is no way that Belarus will avoid being dragged into this war. If Belarus is dragged into this war, well, we have another big problem there. So, and you mentioned there was this, you're more optimistic about it. I honestly, every day I'm trying to find something like, my worry is that Putin is just going to playing the long game, and he's not counting his resources and his people, of course, never. And I'm afraid of the outcome.
Putin is definitely thinks that he's playing a long game. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Putin wants us to think that he's playing the long game. He doesn't have reserves, and he doesn't have resources to play a long game. Okay. I will start from a different side. First of all, I'm very, very optimistic. And it's not easy to make me very optimistic, and I am, because, in my opinion, that's an objective way of reflecting things. First of all, for Ukraine to lose this war, we need to define what will be enough for Putin. Putin pretends that if you give me this and if you give me that, I'll stop. Hogwash. You know that this is bull. Okay? This is for people, for the old Macron and old Germans 2 weeks ago. Now, everybody understands that there will be win or a loss. It will not be anything in between. What he will be doing in between, if he will get enough of a territory, he will try to do that peaceful stance. So he will have enough of a time, to bring more reserves, to reorganize, and everything else. Ukrainians understand that, and they will never fall for this. It's not possible. But if Ukraine will lose, it will not Ukraine who will lose. It will be the West who is lost. Okay? And lost did not because it did not have enough reserves, and not because it did not have enough force, and not because it did not have enough resources, but because it did not have enough brains to throw real, you know what I'm saying? A decisive movement. And in my opinion, that is exactly what's behind us. The Lend-Lease program, and I remember we had a full hour about the Lend-Lease program. Lend-Lease is a signature of American president. That this will happen, you will have to step over our dead body, of American dead body. That's what Lend-Lease is. Lend-Lease is if you will tell me, Alex, I will give you anything you want. Why am I giving you anything you want? Because I believe that this is my win too. You understand what I'm saying? That if you lose, I will lose. That's
I'm
why
invested in you. I'm invested in your win.
I'm invested in you to the end. Save surviving the country. You know what I'm saying? That will never happen, and you understand that it will never happen. Whatever, but it would have been a dicey situation if Russia have reserves and resources. What we know today from our, from the Russian blogs and from talking to a lot of people, Moscow and St. Petersburg don't feel that war at all. They don't take any guys from Moscow and St. Petersburg. They take the guys from the poor middle of the Russia
Periphery.
and
Yep.
the people who forgot. I mean, if you look at what happened to their cities and to happen to their villages in the last 30 years, it's terrible. It's unimaginable. The people on the West cannot imagine what happened there when you have, the devastation that it's like war already been there. It's like what they do today is they're turning the Ukraine into their own cities and
Russian reality.
Yes, because we had, remember that there was a several situation when the soldiers from Siberia and Central Russia were angry with Ukrainians, and they were like, who allowed you to live like that? Who allowed you to live like that? You should see how we live. So that's an old Russian thing, right? That everything has to be equal. This is why the revolution succeeded. Is because it was so easy to provoke the Russian peasants that that everybody should have as many as, so we'll take everything and we'll divide between everybody. So for them, it's a psychological, when they came to Ukraine and they found that wonderful small Ukrainian villages, which are not, the piles of garbage, where there are roads, roads. Half of Russia does not have roads. They after the rain or whatever, you remember that much, right? And they go to Ukraine, they come to Ukraine, they see roads everywhere, asphalt roads everywhere. They're angry. They're not just, they're angry. The soldiers themselves are angry. And they're stealing things that nobody else would ever steal. They're taking the bathroom. what was it called? I don't even remember.
The toilets, yeah.
The toilets.
No, yeah.
They put the toilets on top of
That's
the tanks.
the same was when they entered Germany at the end of the World War II. Angry, absolutely ravaging everything,
Because they were told that they are, that they're the most progressive, the most advanced country in the world, and they came to these villages and they saw that Ukrainians, look how they live. I wanted to address your concern about Belarus a little bit. I tell you one thing from my experience in the war and from everything I read. Yes, you can push the army to fight, but you cannot make it fight. You can push the army to the front. You know what I'm saying? You can put the soldiers into the foxholes, but you cannot make them fight. I'm not even talking about Belarus army. It's a small army. They never had anything like the fighting experience, which is, by the way, one of the most important things. It's not that. They will not go and fight. They will do everything not to do that. The question, of course, is Ukraine will still have to address that. Ukraine will still have to spend some of their, troops and some of their reserves, but most probably the Lukashenko will just cross the border, dig in, and stay there. So that will be an excuse for him, for the Putin to say, listen, you want me to go to Ukraine? I'm in Ukraine. And if he will give them the order to shoot, they will shoot 45 degrees, to the right or to the left. They will not do that. If you will look today at the how like, you remember when the Americans started to send these big guns, the howitzers. And if you look how Ukrainian crew, the howitzer crew, how they work, you will see the most hard-working people in the world. And this is not a duel. This is not that you are real fast because, the other guys is... No, it's not. They have time because it's in them. You know what I'm saying? They give everything. That will never happen with the army who doesn't want to fight, with the soldiers who don't agree to die today. That is a very special feeling that I had because I never was on the, for a long time on the fighting line. But I did have that. I remember that feeling that if I die today, I will not be an unhappy guy. You know what I'm saying? I'll die with a smile on my face. And it may not be this, but that's a feeling. That's a feeling with which Ukrainian army has in almost every soldier. And that feeling will hardly be seen in a Belarus army. There is no reason for that. But Lukashenko is a different story. He is an old snake. He has to satisfy the master. So he will do it. He already shown in the past 30 years that he can manage this. We'll do this, and he agreed to that, and he'll take this, and it will be a long-term, the trade here and there and here and there, and for every bullet that one Belarus guy will shoot, he will ask for another $500,000 from Putin. And Putin goes to him. Address another thing for you. Putin goes to Belarus, and Putin pushed Lukashenko, not because he's winning the war. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, everybody understands.
He would not do that. He would not share his win with anybody. And Lukashenko will, of course, Putin knows that if even be a tiny Lukashenko will always say and say, we. Remember how we won the war? You understand that, right? So Putin goes crazy when he thinks about it, but he has no choice because he's losing, and he knows that there is no a light at the end of the tunnel, but he will pretend that the light is there, and he will put the light there himself in the middle of the night, so others got disoriented because he has no exit. For him, it's in his mind, it's a win, or it's a terrible, hiding somewhere with a plastic operation, somewhere in the islands, someplace, sitting, in a bunker the rest of his life.
Still going to be tracked down. Still going to be tracked down.
No, of course. But he always thought that he's smarter than everybody else. All these guys lose because they think that they're smarter than anyone else. That's what does the dictators in.
I watch it internally too between his strongmen like Kadyrov, who is making ridiculous statements, and that these ridiculous statements are coming from the fear of losing. Fear. There's a tremendous fear, and especially on people like him because he was considered to be.
But in a Western society, what fear does is fear brings you to the table, and you meet another guy who is ready at the table to deal with you. In a Russian world, the fear makes you do desperate things because you know that the guy at the other end of the table will not yield 1 inch.
No, they're going to put a boot on your face.
Yes, they're going to put a boot on your face. Exactly. You said it better than anything I've heard in a long
Yeah,
time.
the boot on the
Boot in
face.
your
That's
face.
Russia.
Yeah.
Yeah, boot on the face. Well, Sash, thank you so much. I want to finish today because I was so much involved. I'm getting more and more involved in everything that is around and about Ukraine from
Uh-huh.
the way I can. So I want to just say, finish and say Slava Ukraini. I hope this
Slava
nightmare
Ukraini,
will
Geroyam Slava. Da.
soon end for them. I really hope
Okay,
so.
Regina. Thank you so much. It was so good seeing you again.